Hello and welcome to Kahali. We're back again with the top news item of the day. And today is, of course, Prime Minister Modi is in Uzbekistan for the SCO summit, which is a gathering of about 8 nations and other nations as observers and
Pakistan for
things
the
and that
SCO
of that
summit,
sort.
which
And
is a gathering of about eight
it's a very
nations
important
and other
occasion
nations
also
as
in many
observers
ways
and things of
because this is
that
the
sort.
first time that Prime Minister Modi is meeting President Xi uh, post the standoff that has taken place. So that's kind of interesting. It's the first time Xi has actually left China since the pandemic started. It's another occasion where you have Putin in the midst of the Ukraine war, who is also making a big appearance at the international summit. You have Iran that's also going to be there, sanctioned by the Americans. So the Western media has, of course, taken a very dim view of this gathering, and I think it was the Sunday Times that said that this is basically a bunch of anti-Western dictators. But on the other hand, this is also an important gathering of the non-Western part of the world. Something like 40% of the GDP and a third of the world's. Oh, wait a minute. 40% of the world's population is represented in this meeting of leaders. And Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, of course, you've seen him before on this channel. Also an author, and from what I know, was instrumental back in the day in the forming and the join and the I guess the joining of India in the SCO. Figuring out what our
Starting the
space.
process.
Yes, starting the process, and these things take many years. So, welcome, Ambassador Dogra, and let's please, if you could start with that process, so that we get a little more bit more about this summit.
Thank you, Advaita. Always a pleasure to be on your show. It's beautifully structured and very well presented.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Now, if you want me to start with that process, have to go back in years to the times when I was younger. Not as young as you are, but younger still. This was 2002, and I was Joint Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs. And one of the first things I noticed on taking charge was a single sheet of paper in the file saying, SCO, we should not opt for observer status or membership later on. That is it. No
Hmm.
reason why we should not try for it. No reason why we should not opt for it. No reason what is it that repels us. So I thought about it and I said, there is one reason why we should try for it, why we should put in our candidature. And that reason is that SCO, even at that time, had the membership of Russia, China, and the stans, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. Now, these are six countries whose prime ministers, defense ministers, external foreign ministers, and some other ministerial levels used to meet at least once a year. So, by not participating in that, we would be missing the chance of participating in discussions and also having a meeting of mind on many issues, plus resolving some misunderstandings on some issues if there are any misunderstandings. So I saw more negatives in not joining than any positive in staying away, and that was the basic line of my argument. Fortunately, the government at that time, Mr. Vajpayee, readily agreed with me. In fact, I got the nod of the entire government within days after a couple of years of resistance. So,
Hmm.
because I saw the logic and reason in it. But after that, the process started because we could not just send in an application and say that we want to become an observer. Uh,
Hmm.
the procedure, diplomatic procedure, is that for an important country like India, you must take in soundings from the member states. That means the countries I've listed, whether they had any objection. And we approached China the last because we knew that if we approach China first, there could be snakes and ladders kind of issue. So it took us nearly 3 years because you could only approach them when there's a summit meeting between the prime minister and the prime minister of the other country or the president of the other country. Fortunately, they were all responsive, and finally, when we approached China, it too. So 2005, I think we became the observer. Then I left the ministry to go to Rome. But then the process of membership started, and that took another nearly 12 years.
Correct.
So
2015, I think, is when we became members.
that's right. So we became members, and I think in retrospect, I don't have any regret that I had suggested that we should become members because it has expanded. The organization has expanded. Iran has today become a member, Afghanistan is a member, and Turkey is aspiring to become a member. Whether they are all the right sort of company to keep, that's a different
Yes,
issue.
yes.
But,
I was going to come to that.
but at least they're there. Uh, the other thing I want to mention is that some of these countries, which were, after their separation from Soviet Union and becoming independent countries, they were down and out. In fact, I had gone there in the 90s, 1992 to be exact. And I must share an anecdote which brings in both Uzbekistan, China, and India. So we had gone to Uzbekistan to set up the embassy. We had gone to Tashkent. Uh, Before the embassy is set up, a team from external affairs goes to sort of find out what kind of issues would there be, what kind of administrative issues that need to be tackled, and so on. So, in course of that, you meet the ministers of the host country and also some of the foreign ambassadors who already set up embassies. So you can learn and exchange views from them on what to look out for, how to handle issues as you're setting up the embassy. Firstly, Uzbekistan was literally down in dumps. It was as backward as anything you could imagine, with very rudimentary facilities. Uh, After all those consultations, we went to the Chinese ambassador, who was very, very gracious, gave us tea, chocolates, and so on. Uh, and we asked questions. He was smiling all the time, giving all the right answers and helpful answers. Finally, we asked him, "What is your banking arrangement in Tashkent?" His face fell. It was almost as if he was going to burst out in tears. So we looked at him and he said, "Excellency, is there something wrong?" He said, "Very wrong. Strange country." So we said, "Why?" He said, "I went to the bank with dollars. The manager came out of his room, took me to his room, gave me cashew nuts, peanuts, almonds, and tea, and so on. And he said, 'You are the most precious guest, honored guest.' So I felt very happy, very nice bank. 1 week later, I needed to take out a few dollars. So I went back again. The manager would not see me. Some clerk came out finally and he said,
Uh-huh.
"In this bank, we take dollars, we don't give back dollars." But Uzbekistan has come a long way from those days, and so has the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So, what we are witnessing today is not something that the editor of the Sunday Times or Times that you quoted is mentioning. Things have changed. It's not as if it is a block of regressive, negative thinking autocrats, as he said. It is a block that is becoming a force in the world. And just look at the statistics you quoted, 40%
Yes,
of the global population. Can
yes,
anyone condemn that? 30% of the global GDP. It
yeah.
means something. So I
It
think
makes sense.
some of the press media in West needs to
mm,
brush up on their current thinking, because earlier they used to spend time and give thought before putting words in print. But now it
mm,
seems it's more of a knee-jerk reaction to whatever side of the bed they got out from in the morning. Uh, East has changed, SEO is undergoing change, and I'll come to that as we go along.
mhm.
But there are issues which are both of serious concern. There are issues which are developing, and there are issues which could affect the outside world also.
Mm. I mean, I find it remarkable that of the top five economies in the world, two of them are part of the SCO, namely China at number two and us at number five. So there is a lot that can be achieved. And Prime Minister
Yes.
Modi today in his speech spoke about becoming a manufacturing hub, and he has his sort of priorities for being there.
There is a lot that has been achieved, and there's a lot that can be achieved. For example, when the world was really in trouble during the COVID crisis, uh, which were the two countries which were manufacturing and sending out the largest number of vaccines? India first, and then China.
Mm,
USA, of course, also pitched in, but basically it was India which reached out to more than 100 countries,
mm,
which is the country which has become the software hub of the world. It is India. So, India and China are both important ingredients of a mixture called the world today.
mm.
Uh, they are going to increase in importance one way or the other.
Right.
And I would not write off Russia either, because all the anxiety of the West today is because of the issue of oil and gas that they were getting so far from Russia. And in a moment of surly reaction, they decided to put sanction on it. It's like a man who's climbed a tree and is cutting off the branch he's sitting on. So I think there's a lot of rethinking that West has to do on uh, its the way it is handling the world so far. The world has changed. The West too needs to change.
Maybe the West needs to stop thinking like they are leading the world and they are the repositories of all that is good and noble in the world. And these ancient civilizations, really, be it China or India, have something to offer as well.
Absolutely, and not only in terms of the ancient wisdom or ancient culture, but also they are in tune with the modern times. I mean, otherwise, China won't be called the factory of the world.
Yeah. And we, the
Otherwise,
pharmaceutical company of the world. Yeah.
all the attention of America would not be focused on South China Sea and the attempt at freedom of navigation of seas. So obviously, there are things happening which are uncomfortable to some extent, which are new to the way of operation of the old order. The fact is that old order has to change because the new order is emerging. And I don't just mean the rules based order.
I want
I
to talk to you about that, the new world order, and we'll get to that. And I just want to tell our viewers, if you want to ask the ambassador any questions, please drop them in the chat, and I'd be happy to ask them for you. Ambassador, Putin. I mean, you mentioned the South China Sea, so it's a good time to bring this up. In the readout that you we have post the Putin Xi meeting, he kind of made a comment about Taiwan, and Taiwan was quick to kind of get back with a response. And on the other hand, Xi kind of avoided the mention of the Ukraine war completely. So there is some sort of simpatico sort of situation between these two countries, Russia and China. And the other part, second part of this is when I was going through the list of nations, And I saw Pakistan, China. I mean, Russia, of course, we have a good relationship with. Iran. I was Iran also. We have a kind of a good relationship. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good. I mean, because of the sanctions, we're not buying their oil right now. I was just thinking, who are our friends here, and are we going to be able to make friends here?
Well, there are a number of questions in your question. Uh, Let me start with Russia-China issue. You're right. Putin, because he is in the situation that he is reaching out to China uh, in a more public manner than is normally the case. For example, in the introductory remarks, when they started their meeting, he said, I understand your concerns and questions to President Xi. Now,
Yes.
normally, this is not the kind of language that a Soviet and now a Russian leader would use, because that means that he's in a weaker position.
Correct.
Second, which people have not noticed yet because it's just come out half an hour back. I saw it in uh, South China Post, which is a newspaper that comes out of Hong Kong.
Hmm.
There is an article that President Xi has written,
Oh.
and it is a rework of a speech he had given 2 3 years back, but there is a significant portion in it. Firstly, it is written just before his trip, and the significant portion is that look at Russia. Once it was a great power, and
Oh.
what has it been reduced to?
Wow.
We must avoid those mistakes. Now, that reveals a lot.
Yes.
So, second, I think if you look for a moment at the Ukraine issue, in many ways, it is West versus Russia. The same thing is not happening in terms of China and Russia versus West. Even if China is giving some help, which I presume it must be, but it is neither open nor so vast in quantity or effect as the help that American and other actors in West are giving to Ukraine by almost active participation.
Yes. Very true.
So that is number one. Second, I would now like to digress a little from your question. You can ask me that again later. Look at the situation in the membership of SCO today. Even as we speak, Azerbaijan membership and the region, because
Hmm. Hmm.
Azerbaijan and Armenia are not members.
Armenia. Yeah.
Azerbaijan is attacking Armenia. It has killed many of its soldiers over the last 2 days. Taliban in Afghanistan are shelling Uzbekistan right now. Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are in a shooting match. There are artillery duels going on there. Georgia is uncomfortable because Russia had taken over some of its enclaves, and it is thinking of a referendum on how to get back those enclaves. So the situation is very delicate
Hmm. Hmm.
in the membership of SCO and in the region around it. And one of its prime members, Russia, is in an active war. Kazakhstan was assured by President Xi, he came to Kazakhstan first and then to Uzbekistan, that China will not allow Kazakhstan's sovereignty to be impinged. And that was a
Hmm.
direct reference to Russia,
Hmm.
because Kazakhstan has some worries on that score. So it is a region which has potential for a larger conflagration.
Hmm. Hmm.
It is a region which needs constant monitoring and doctrine. And that is why I think it is good that India would be assuming the chair of SCO at a time like this when its
Hmm.
soft touch probably
Hmm.
may bring down the temperatures and bringing the healing uh, touch. So
Hmm.
I think in many ways we are at a critical juncture, and here I must mention that all that is happening today, all of it was not anticipated when I was writing my latest book, Wartime. But wartime is about what is possible by 2035 and the years in between. And
Hmm.
it does analyze each and every region in terms of the potential for a war or a conflict. And I think we in the East need to be extra careful.
Western media has sort of also said that so-called Western allies like India and Turkey are there at this summit. Do you think they're observing this very carefully, very closely to see what happens here?
Well, under normal circumstances, West would not have bothered about this
Hmm.
meeting of SEO leaders. Probably it may have found a small paragraph mentioned in page 19 of the Times or the Guardian. Uh, but now they are concerned about what might be cooking when Xi and Putin meet.
Hmm.
That was their major issue. Uh, in terms of any promises that she might give to Putin on the situation in Ukraine, and also on the issue of energy supplies, whether there would be any discussions between the leadership, and if so, what effect it would have on West. So their basic concerns were these: Ukraine and the energy issue. So that is why they gave it a little more attention. Otherwise, under normal circumstances, they would not have been bothered.
It's also being said that because of this Ukraine issue, Russia is also looking to now pivot its supply, about a third of its supply to from Europe, redirect it to China because it's obviously facing a war which has gone on now for 7 months, plus the sanctions. And they're very hopeful, and Mongolia has come on board and said, yes, you can run the pipeline through us to get to China. So, and the other on the other hand, Iran is very keen that India starts buying from them. In fact, they've dropped, I think, the price by $9 as compared to what Russia is selling their oil to us for. So, what do you think is going to come of these kind of negotiations, wherein there are other factors, other nations who are invested in the choices that are going to be made?
Well, quite frankly and quite brutally, uh, the American decision to sanction
Mhm.
is the most ill thought and ill conceived decision. Because if you sanction someone, you will also suffer in the process. It's not as if only the sanctioned country or entity is going to suffer. Uh, for example, today, America has under sanction 10,000 entities and individuals around the world. Now, if 10,000 are outside its business limits, that means it is denying itself those opportunities. The second thing is that Europe was dependent on Russian oil and gas supply, and it was getting it very cheap. And that is why its industries were thriving. Today, the condition is that West Germany is worried that many of the industries may have to shut down because
Yes.
of the increasing cost of gas and oil for it. And there is no way that Germany or other West European countries can easily replace, especially the supply of gas. After all, tankers in the world are limited and their usage is booked in months in advance, if not years in advance. So no one is going to say, okay, I'll not take gas, you take it to Germany. That's not going to happen. Even if Qatar were willing to increase its gas supply, it will not find the tankers to take the gas to Germany or France or whatever. So it is a self defeating exercise. Secondly, what do sanctions achieve? For example, China is reported to be supplying gas imported from Russia to West Europe. There are some reports of other countries also refining oil and supplying it to European and even American destinations. So all you're doing is bootlegging on an international level.
Rerouting the whole supply chain. That's really what's happening here. Ambassador, I was watching. There has been the West has taken a very serious, made a serious effort to alienate Putin. I know most recently with the Queen's funeral, Russia has not received an invite, although Putin did express his condolences, and then when Charles became king, he did send his compliments or whatever. But the response to that has been zero invitation to Russia. Do you think this is really going to work? And how important is Putin's appearance at the SCO now in this context?
Well, SCO, of course, is his home territory, so to speak, because the meeting was being held in Uzbekistan, which was once a part of Soviet Union,
Soviet,
and
yes.
Russia still is capo del capo. It is the chief in the ex-Soviet zone. So his appearance at SCO was never in doubt, and in fact, so far all the visuals of him interacting or landing in Uzbekistan show a man of confidence.
Hmm,
It's not as if a leader who's gone bananas because of the present defeat or reported defeat in some front.
yes.
So that has not happened. Second, the larger question, which in fact is one of the questions I've also addressed in wartime,
Mhm.
is why is it that Russia is treated as the other who will never be admitted into the Western councils? In
Hmm,
fact, if you look at it, in some of the worst moments of European history, it was Russia which saved it. When Napoleon was riding high, it was the Russian winter which defeated Napoleon. When Hitler was
Hitler.
knocking off frontiers, it was the Russian army which defeated it. Just to give you a figure, American soldiers, maybe about 100,000 or 97,000, died in the entire Second World War. The British too, I think, would be in hundreds of thousands or so. Very few people realize that 27 million Russians, Soviets at that time, died in the Second World War.
Hmm,
Soldiers and civilians included 27 million.
my God.
And yet, as soon as the war ended, Soviet Union was declared virtually a pariah state.
Hmm,
Or look at what happened in the 90s. The German unification would not have happened but for the nod from the Soviet Union. Gorbachev was the Soviet leader at that time. The splintering of Soviet Union need not have happened. And when the Iron Curtain fell, it again required some kind of a nod from the Soviet side. And Gorbachev at that time said, now we can live as a happy family.
hmm,
And what did he get in turn? NATO started advancing eastwards, which is the cause of the Ukrainian trouble today. So I
hmm,
do not really know why this dislike, uh, this almost visceral hatred for Russia.
hmm,
Mentioned about the lack of invitation for Queen's funeral. Uh, but
Yes.
I remember in 80s, Russian when Russia was holding Olympics in Moscow, America decided to boycott it.
Hmm.
Now, these would normally be declared as childish reactions. So,
Hmm.
if America then and UK now have achieved anything, I think the world has not seen the results of that achievement.
True. True. And and this brings me to like the question that came up a little earlier about the new world order. And in fact, before that, I just want to add that the Western media has also been saying that Syria's Bashar might turn up for this particular summit also. Whisper, whisper. There's been no sign of that. The summit is going to finish today, but this they are trying to kind of caricature it as this meeting of autocrats, so to speak. But coming to this new world order, uh, how much of a role do you think the SCO is going to play in that new world order? And also, India in particular, Prime Minister Modi's handling of India's position during the Ukraine war when it broke out was really a master stroke in international diplomacy. He was, able to manage Russia as well as the United States and its Western allies. This is again going to be a tricky walk for him, is it not?
Well, to answer your question, SEO as such cannot by itself, as an organization, contribute or change the world order as it exists now. But its membership on their individual basis would have a very large and major role to play. China, Russia, and India, each in its own way, uh, could add or reduce the benefits or the advantages of the world order as it is emerging and as it is now. Second thing is on the issue of autocrats, I think it is Western propaganda. I would classify Trump and Boris Johnson both as autocrats of the worst kind. I mean, imagine a president smiling when the shrine of democracy is being attacked, which is what happened in Washington.
January
And there
6th,
are
yes.
accusations that Boris Johnson was happy that Russia attacked Ukraine when it did because it diverted attention away from his own misdeeds in England. So, do you classify such selfish acts as, I mean, they are not the hallmark of a Democrat, neither in Boris Johnson's case nor in Trump's case. So, to call someone autocrat, I think, is a very loose definition, and to condemn an entire organization like that is even more churlish. As far as Mr. Modi is concerned, he had a meeting with President Putin just about a couple of hours back, and in response to his question, President Putin told him, I understand your concern, uh, and let me assure you that I also want peace to return, and hopefully there will be some developments. So, obviously, when the Prime Minister of India is talking, people abroad, leaders abroad, take him seriously. And to that extent, I think the next year can be a constructive phase for SEO.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And I really want to chat with you about, the new government in Sweden, which is on the right. You said that was your first posting as a young officer, so it would be very interesting to hear about that. And then, of course, Italy, of course, where you were served as ambassador, if I'm not mistaken. Where again, there's a 45-year-old lady, Georgia, and I can't quite recall her last name at this present time, but she's tipped to win. So there is this shift happening, and mostly because of immigration policies of Europe, which are being resisted now by the people, and they're exercising that resistance by their vote. So, would love to chat with you about that in a more detailed way in the future. But thank you so much for joining us this evening and for giving us much needed history as well as perspective on the SCO and what's in it for India. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Advaita. Always a pleasure to be with you and to try and answer your very well researched, very well formulated questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All